more love, more joy, everything.
It's inspired young people.
Inspiration comes from within you. When you clear out the garbage that's in your mind, you then create space for something better, more beautiful to come in.
Let's have life and have it more abundantly.
I say yes.
It's like taking a workshop. I get to be in my pajamas.
We have a very active imagination, which is why it's important to learn how to harness it and then point it in the direction you want to go.
I listen to your show every day.
It's time now for Living Your Inspired Life with Susan Burrell. Susan is no-nonsense, inspirational, motivational, and fun.
This is positive talk radio.
Practical wisdom for everyday life.
It's a gift you give yourself.
Now, here's Susan.
And welcome to Living Your Inspired Life. You're listening to News Talk 1590 KVTA. And at the beginning of every show, so I'm just going to do it again, folks, go to livingyourinspiredlife.org. We've got some great conversations there. And I invite you to possibly create your life using Living Your Inspired Life as your Kickstarter every morning or in the evenings as you're unwinding and listening to a show and just kind of getting tuned up to the truth of who you are and the life you were born to live. So that's livingyourinspiredlife.org. So today I have a guest whose book came to me and it caught my attention because of the title. It's called Living Hope: Steps to Leaving Suffering Behind. And I don't know about anybody out there, but man, I've been in some suffering places and I would really like it to get behind me and just leave the baggage and get on with a happy life. So I want to welcome the author, Lynne Cockrum-Murphy. Lynne, thanks for joining me.
Hi, Susan. Thank you for having me here today.
I'm so thrilled. So I'm just going to let everybody know just a little bit of your background, and then we'll get into the Living Hope book. So Lynne is an intuitive consultant specializing in helping those who seek assistance with their spiritual path, in addition to facilitating physical healing, emotional growth, and removing blocks to a life of joy, meaning, and purpose. Now, and I love that. Who doesn't want more joy and meaning and purpose?
I so agree. I discovered that when I did my dissertation back in 2001. It was, I was reading Viktor Frankl and Maslow and people like that, and came across those words, and I thought, I want that for my mission statement. I want that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And bringing up Maslow, I often talk about the hierarchy of needs, the pyramid that he created, if you will, and how we move up that. And your Living Hope book kind of walks through those areas.
Oh, I can see why you say that. Yes.
Yes.
That originally I was in survival mode as a child and kept the suffering going after childhood by my own viewpoints, my own thinking, and then gradually transitioned out of all of that to a self-actualized life. Yes.
Oh, my God. I'm applauding you right now. Yay, Lynne. Good for you, because a lot of people, I don't know that a lot of people even get that they're in suffering to begin with. They just think that's life, and this is the way life is, and Murphy's Law. Sorry, Lynne. But, my grandfather used to always quote Murphy's Law, and if it's going to happen, it's going to happen to him kind of thing. So the fact that you can be one of those people that can inspire hope, that you can transform your life no matter what, is awesome to me. So thank you and congratulations, and thank you again.
Thank you.
So let's begin. Let's tell our listeners what caused you to write the book, and then we'll get into the law of cause and effect a little later. But what caused you to write this particular book?
A lot of my life I've been guided by an inner push that I have to do something, keeps coming up to mind, keeps coming up. So I wrote my first version of this as my dissertation. I did autobiography and then research upon it because I wanted to know, why was it that I came out of the family that I was in and my circumstances, and how was it that I became successful in life? And I'm not talking about wealth. I'm just talking about, I was able to go to work every day, have a good job, have a good marriage. How did I do that? It's not typical for people who grow up in dysfunction and abuse and trauma. So it started there, and then I noticed years after that came out, I wanted to write it again. I wanted to do it again. So after I retired, I really tried to, and I would arrange writing retreats for my husband and I, and we'd go away on vacation, and he would write and write and write, and I would play solitaire. I couldn't get the book out yet.
Yeah.
Finally, I worked with a writing coach just over a year ago, and so the book came out and really said what I needed to say. It was a healing process once again, doing this work, but it really got the message out there, too, because I didn't want to just talk about myself. I wanted to talk about how do you get out of all that.
Well, would you share with our listeners? Well, okay, first of all, before I ask you this, I want to read, this is toward the end of the book, in your chapter called Love, what you wrote. So this is a quote. "The more I filled my bucket and the more I did to repair the hole in the bottom of it, the better life got. And the more that moments of happiness and connection to source became my normal." Connections to happiness and source became your normal. That to me is kind of really what I think our purpose here on life is to fill the bucket with positive things and repair the holes that we think are in the bucket or our heart.
And then that connection with source, however a person might imagine that to be, because it's different for all of us. But that is what keeps me going. So I can connect to that through nature, through people, or in silence. But that's what makes life all worthwhile for me.
So would you share just briefly what your journey was? Because you had a very dramatic beginning. And so you definitely are someone that can speak about living hope, actually living it.
So it started, and the first chapter of the book starts with the house fire. We were in Northern California, and the furnace exploded. The house burned down. My father carried me out. I was found on the lawn in front of the house, and he went back in to save my sisters. Their bedroom was on the other side of where the furnace had exploded, so he wasn't able to reach them. They died in the house. He died in the hospital in a matter of days. And I survived, lived in the hospital, I don't know how long. So it started with that. And you can, my mother wasn't home at the time. So it was me and Mom after that. And I think you might imagine how she was impacted by that.
Right.
Changed her world. When I was 4, she married. And she married a man who was emotionally abusive. By the time I was 9, he died in a logging accident. In between those years, I was molested by relatives, different relatives. Mom remarried when I was 10. She married a man with a serious alcohol problem. She had drank regularly ever since I can remember. Mm-hmm. And their drinking really was horrific, and he was physically and emotionally abusive. So that went on. I left home at 17. I had had enough. I needed to get out of there. And by then I was very much an angry young woman. You mentioned earlier how we don't actually often realize that we're suffering. And I just thought, this is how life is. And my God, I'm just going to get through it, and I'm going to tough it out. And, I became very hard on myself. So I went to college. Well, first I joined a Buddhist sect because I was looking for some answers. Went on to college, graduated, started my first teaching position, and my mother and stepfather bought a bar. And within 2 months, it was robbed, and she was shot and killed.
Oh, my gosh, Lynn. I mean, Hollywood could not make up this story. Really.
This is for one life. It really is.
Any one of those things is enough for one life.
Yeah. It's funny how it's always taken me a long time for it to sink in, like, holy cow, Lynn, you're doing so good.
Right.
Yeah. So that was the last of the trauma, though, in my life was with her death. My stepdad died a couple of years later. They did eventually catch the guy, put him in prison, and I talk about that in the book, and how he was supposed to have had so many sentences big sentences that I never would have thought he would get out, and yet he did. So I talk about that in the book. So that's really how it started. There's a few things in there I didn't include, but yeah, I was pretty miserable.
So it sounds like at an early age, you intuitively got that there was something more than this pain and suffering and abuse that you were being forced to or subjected to, and that your intuitive guided you to some spiritual seeking.
I've wondered exactly how that was. Is that just something that I came in with? Because we do come in with our own attributes. Mm-hmm. Or is it that my family did take me to a lot of different churches, at least 5 different kinds. And I got this foundational, there's something greater than yourself that you can trust in and believe in, it exists. And yet I saw my family being really unhappy and doing a lot of drinking. So I didn't see what they told me to do fulfill them. And that was why I went and checked out Buddhism when I was 17, because it was like, well, maybe these people have some answers, because my people don't.
Right. And so what did you uncover with that exploration?
I learned a lot. Their classes were so valuable that I think the one that impacted me the most is the law of cause and effect, that it's a foundational law that exists for our planet and our universe. It would be like the law of gravity. It just is. The law of cause and effect is what creates karma, or why we have karma, is because that law is in place. And I began to look at my life differently, and eventually was able to take responsibility for everything that's in my life.
So I want to read a quote in your book again, Lynne, about cause and effect, and then I want to talk about this responsibility piece, because I think that often freaks people out. But
sure.
in your book, you said, I learned that cause and effect was more than what people generally refer to as karma. It is that in each and every decision made, each and every choice creates the patterns in our life. We can change it in a moment. We can keep on the same trajectory for lifetimes. So either we can change it in a moment, or we stay on that trajectory. That is a pattern.
Right. We can keep recreating what we've created, or we can change it. It's not easy, but it's so very possible. So I used to say things to my mom, like, why are you guys acting like this? I'd be at a family event with friends and drinking and a holiday, and they'd get out of control, and they would behave in a way that I would say to her, what are you doing? She goes, oh, no, it's fine, it's normal. And I'd say, no, it isn't. And that's when I realized that somehow I learned, or she even taught me, these values, but they were throwing them out the window. And that wasn't okay with me. I wasn't going to live like that.
That's amazing to me that you could be so wise at such a young age to see that, to recognize that there was something, that behavior being modeled to you was not the kind of behavior that you wanted to live.
So, yeah, is that something I learned, or is it something I came in with? I don't know for sure, but I really appreciate that it's there, because I could hear within me truth, and I could see what I was seeing wasn't truth. And I was able to hold on to that and look for who's got what I want. And that became my seeking.
Who's got what I want? So somebody outside of you.
Absolutely. And that was, I love that you say outside of me, because that's been a whole process of decades of seeking God outside of me, if I want to call it God or source or creator, whatever, but that it was outside of me, and I had to find it and get it. And I don't see it that way today, but that was part of the beginning.
Yeah, I think those of us who have lived a bit of life, the seeking piece, I know for me, I'm speaking for me now, was very much similar. The thing that's outside of me that I feel like I don't have, like love. So I'm looking for love outside of me, because that's kind of what was modeled in society anyway. You know, you go see a movie and it's always you fall in love and then you live happily ever after. Hello.
As if a person can fulfill you.
Right. But
Yeah,
and that's the thing we don't know when we're younger. We think another person can fulfill us. We think the addiction can fulfill us.
Right. Exactly. And it's a painful way to learn, no, look again.
Yeah. So how did that come about for you? I mean, specifically, there was some healing modalities that you began to learn that you now utilize in your practice, yes?
Healing modalities, but in the beginning, it was practicing Buddhism. So that was a sect that chanted. So I chanted and allowed myself to grow. I studied psychology. I studied spiritual masters. After college, I moved into a metaphysical Christian commune, a very unique group of people in Oregon, and I really let my life be changed by that, just really gave it over. Because my life in Reno, Nevada, working in the casino and college and stuff like that, if I had continued that life pattern, I wouldn't have lived more than a few more years.
Yeah.
I was told that, and I can see that. But I didn't. I took a right-hand turn, left the state, got a new job, moved in with these people, and said, you know what, I don't know what I'm doing. I'll do what I'm told. Give me direction. And a wonderful minister, and they did. And, then things like the Holy Spirit came into my life. All kinds of changes. That's when the channeling began. And you know how it's funny, like in your private life, you have that spiritual growth and development, and then you have daily life to go out and test it out in.
Right.
Personalities, people, jobs, that kind of stuff.
The practice
it's a
ground.
huge growth period.
So you mentioned channeling. So I've talked to a few channelers on my show. So and I notice that it comes to people, that opening, or however you would describe it, comes to people in slightly different ways. So how did that happen for you? Were you like hearing voices in your head? I think that's how a lot of people that have not had an experience with channeling think it happens.
For me,
I'm sorry.
For me,
you know what I'm saying?
Well, it started a little different for me. There was a woman in our group who channeled, and sometimes she didn't want to bring forth messages. And so they would start coming to me. And,
oh my gosh, so you guys were bouncing stuff off of each other in a way.
So the entities, the energies that would come, it would be like pushing into my meditations and saying, you need to tell them about this, you need to talk about this, and so on. And then finally I just went and took a class and developed it at a metaphysical church in that town. And then it's just evolved over the years. It has changed some.
So was it scary at first when that was happening?
No, it really wasn't, because it was amazing to me. I felt full of awe because in meditation or in those states, you feel very connected to something greater than yourself, and the energy comes up and it lifts you up, and you realize that you have more awareness than you ever knew you had, and so on, and you can hear kind of clearly, and then you wonder, should I open my mouth or say anything, and so on. So there's a process to it, but it's elevating for me.
And how do you utilize that in your practice now?
Well, interestingly, I don't channel per se so much, but I do now raise my vibrations up, go up to where my brain wave state changes to theta state. And from there I can hear really well. And so I was working with a client this morning, and she had a couple of questions about, she's so cute, she's very young. She had a question about a boy. And so I was able to kind of communicate with his energy and bring her some images from that about what's going on with him. Another client this morning had asked about pets and her husband and a problem that they're having. And so I just go up, open myself, and I can just you get that knowing. Oh, it's about this. You need to resolve this. If you address this, that will go away. So for right now, that's how the channeling is. And other times it's a collective of energies that really don't care to have their name listed. It's not about identity and ego. It's about energy. And that and a combination of my higher self is what comes through. Mm-hmm. And those are different. My next book has some of those messages in it, and they even blow me away. They're beautiful.
So, Lynne, let's go back a bit to the law of cause and effect. And I want to read another quote from your book.
Okay.
In the chapter, We Create Our Life. You say, our time here in these bodies that obscure our light feels dense, and at the same time, it represents the consolidation of everything we've been, everything we've learned and experienced, all the cause and effect, and characterizes everything we want for our current experience. So can you explain that? Can we tease that out a bit?
I love that you read right out of the book, and then I hear it and I think, wow, that's really cool.
It's a nice reflection, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what does that mean?
Okay. So when I look at the life that I have right now, my home is very calm. It's very lovely. It's small. It's just perfect for my husband and myself. Inside me, it's quiet and calm, and that light that I am is more apparent to me. My outer life is a reflection of my inner life. The early years, the first 25 years, was very much about all the karma that I created in the past and wanted to get done now. Mm-hmm. And so that's done. The period in between was an interweaving of growing, expanding, letting go of the old, embracing possibilities, and choosing what I wanted. So this is where I end up, where I take a story that it was such a painful thing to live through, but I can use it as a model of no matter where you've been, you can take a step forward and you can change your life. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's kind of how I see it.
Mm-hmm. So then let's talk about the responsibility piece that we mentioned earlier in terms of the law of cause and effect, because if I am causing my life, right? If I am consciously causing my life, then the effects that occur in my life are because I caused it. Yeah?
Yeah.
So then there are many people, me sometimes, a lot, well, occasionally, yesterday, that go, wow, I don't want that. Why did that happen to me? Poor me. Oh my goodness, everything's happening to me. Yeah. And I forget, it's easy to forget that I initiated the experience. Yeah. So is that what you mean by responsibility?
I think that generally we're not conscious of what we've created and how we've created what is. And that makes it really hard to take responsibility because you don't get it. What has changed in this time period on Earth is that most of us are moving out of the phase of karma and more into just real immediacy. So the law of karma exists, but I think I wrote about it in the book that we had come back from France. I had some beautiful coffee latte cups, and I was putting them in the cupboard, and I broke one or chipped one. And I was really upset, like, why did that happen? And I could see with just a little bit of conversation how it connected to something I was upset about that had happened in France that I hadn't resolved. And it was like it was still showing up and taking little chips out of my life. So I had to sit down and work myself through it and come to peace with it. So that is how most karma today, for a lot of us, is really immediate. But for the big stuff, or as it was for me in the past, I had no idea that I had set forth a certain plan for this life. And maybe we don't have awareness of what we've chosen to bring into the life, because wouldn't we run screaming from the room and not participate to the best of our ability.
Oh, God, yes.
Of course, of course. So maybe that's why we don't remember what we chose to tackle in this life. And it's hard. It's really hard. When you're caught in the suffering, we lose perspective. So I think that it's a very gradual process of coming to take responsibility for everything. And that's why I think doing healing work or theta healing work or whatever kind, even therapy, to clear our vision so we see ourselves more accurately, that really helps. And that it's not easy, but it's sure worth it.
Okay, I want to talk about the theta healing in a little bit, but I want to tease this out a little bit more about the responsibility thing, because and we talk about this often on Living Your Inspired Life, about self-responsibility, and it's something that I choose to practice myself. And I got to say, Lynne, it gets heavy sometimes. Sometimes I don't think there's hope when I'm taking responsibility for some of my stuff, or recognizing that what's happening to me was a pre-planned thing, not preordained or anything, not necessarily destiny, but an agreement that was made before I was born. That feels heavy to me.
Does it? Okay. Okay, so if I consider the year that my husband chooses to pass, since I expect that he will go before me, how will I take that? Well, it's his choice. It's his divine timing. And for me, it will be at the perfect time, because that's how life works. So I will be grieving for quite a while, and I will wonder and consider and ask God, and I will ask others for support and input, and eventually that cloud will lift, and I will see the perfection of what was, and I will be grateful. And that will probably take a couple, maybe 6 months to 2 years, because it doesn't take me as long to get out of unhappiness as it used to, but that will be a big one. So it's unavoidable. It is something that will be in some version, and can I live with it? Can I accept it? Yes. Can I visually see the perfection in it? Yes.
I hear that. But let's talk about, because you certainly are somebody that bad things happen to.
Yeah.
And then you're talking, and then the converse side is you're talking about responsibility. So let's talk about this pre-birth agreement.
Okay.
That, lots of people do not believe in reincarnation. Lots of people think reincarnation is you come back as a bug, or a fruit, or, whatever it is they think. But there is a truth, especially in Buddhism, of reincarnation being about adding to your karma or burning off your karma and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Buddhism isn't the only thing that I study and adhere to. There's also Hinduism,
mm-hmm.
And other paths, because I think everything is transcendable. And the gurus, the masters, Buddha, they even have the ability to transcend karma. Jesus did too. So, there is the daily suffering, and if I choose to stay, not my marriage is great, but if I chose to stay in an abusive relationship, for instance, I am creating my own karma by making that decision. Things are going to stay bad or get worse. Or if I say, God, show me the way out. I'm ready to take a step. I'm ready to consider. Give me some direction. And then maybe I see a therapist, or I start talking to an old friend that I know will support me. Or I just run away in the middle of the night and go to a neighbor and get into a shelter. However I choose to do that, that changes the whole trajectory at that moment.
Well, let me read another quote from your book, if I may. And this is in the book in the chapter called Multiple Lives.
Yes.
And you say the way we live our lives, this is just supporting what you said, the way we live our lives, the decisions we make, the conclusions we come to, our actions and intentions all go together from each life to determine the next one. In these lives, we often vow never to do something again, or we promise ourselves we will have certain things. We also choose to meet with many of the same people again and again for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's unfinished business, sometimes for love, sometimes for karma. We do this reincarnation thing to learn and to experience ourselves in as many ways as possible. So with that statement, it sounds like karma keeps getting passed from one life to the next until there's some agreement that it's done, or there's some way that I've learned my lesson, if you will.
Okay, so the house fire.
Yes.
My dad was able to save one child in that event, and then he chose to pass. My understanding is that he was extremely grateful to be able to save one child, because in another life, he wasn't able to save any of his family.
Oh, I see.
So for him, this was resolution. Okay. Back to your question, I also think that the karmatic situation we get ourselves into is usually really, really complex and takes a while to sort it out. So if I look at my family, my mother had this agreement to leave in this terribly violent fashion. My dad had a plan to save somebody, to be a savior in the family, and to exit. Mm-hmm. And my sisters came in and were, really joyful presences in my life, and then they're gone, and I choose to continue. So we each have our own karma interplaying within all that. My grandmother, my dad's mom, she chose to have 3 children. One died at 5 years old, because that's what happened during the Depression. And then one died at 27. What was her karma that she chose those things? And then we all came together and interwove it to have this experience. And then here I am, the type that wants to tell the world about it and say, no matter your experience, don't stay stuck there. You can rise above it.
Well, and so again, something else that you said, healing and moving forward means we acknowledge and take responsibility for our lives. This goes back to the responsibility piece, but it does, but not for the abuse that was forced upon us. So yes. Sometimes it feels like, when I'm in my victim mode, I am taking responsibility for the abuse that I feel was heaped on me. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so what would you tell our listeners about how to get out of that kind of a syndrome?
I think it's wonderful to place the blame where it belongs, and that's back on the person. Children are not responsible for the things that adults choose to do to them. Okay. So let's say that first. And then after that, it's our position to go to healthy people and get help. So it can be a minister, it can be a therapist, it can be a teacher. I worked with a client the other day that we talked about shame. She was still carrying a lot of her family's shame, as if it could help them if she took that on. And so we released that from her using Theta Healing.
Well, let's talk about Theta Healing then, because
okay.
I want our listeners to know more about that.
Theta Healing was created by Vienna Stibble, and she's up in Montana, and she teaches all over the world. I went and studied it, and it totally changed my life. As in, it accelerated things, and it got rid of a lot of the baggage that I was still carrying in my head. Mm. So I can look at my father's life of sacrifice and see that my family, my genetic code, has some programming about that. And using the Theta Healing technique, I free myself from that. It is theta brainwave state, prayer and meditation, using downloads, asking Creator for downloads, but also pulling irrational beliefs. And that's what we called it in, because I'm a licensed substance abuse counselor. We call them irrational beliefs or limiting beliefs. And, if for instance, the woman the other day, if she believes that taking her family's shame serves her in some fashion, like maybe it will help heal her parents in some fashion, I can ask Creator to remove that for her, and it's instantaneous. It's a type of healing, and it's instantaneous. There's physical healing, there's emotional, there's spiritual, etc. We work on many levels, including on one's genetics.
Uh-huh. See, I believe that all of that is possible. But the person that's asking for the quote-unquote healing really has to be receptive to it, right? I mean, you can't just change. Because again, if we go back to I am responsible for my life and my choices that I've made because I've created my own life, then in order for me to be healed, I have to really be willing for that healing to occur.
Yes, and Creator has the power that if you say yes,
Mm-hmm.
the healing occurs. You have the ability, if you choose to bring it back to yourself afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And we can do that with recurring thought patterns. It's just that I can take, through prayer, I can take that piece out, and then you can choose to see the world differently or not.
Well, that's interesting because then I would imagine there's some people that go, well, it didn't work. That I do this kind of counseling myself, Lynn, and I know that I watch people going, well, it didn't work. And it is exactly because of what you just said, that then we're still at choice, and I can pick up the old baggage anytime I want.
Right. I use muscle testing.
Uh-huh.
It's really cool to have them stand and make a statement and watch which way their body sways. Is it in agreement or disagreement with that statement? And then after I pull the belief, or God does it, watch them make that same statement and see how their body responds, and it's no longer theirs. So that gives them some evidence. That's kind of cool for them to see, like, wow, it's gone. And I think that helps make it more real for them. But again, if you are going to repeat all your old patterns, then it's going to come back. If you choose to continue growing, then you've got a better chance. Also, I think it's like that peeling of the onion thing,
Mm-hmm.
that we will remove as much as a person can in a day or in a session. And aspects of it might show up. Like for the person we talked about, shame and the family shame that she carried, well, maybe she would still choose to have shame about something she did as a young woman with her sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not tied in with the parents. It's just another aspect of shame that she's ready to release.
Oh, so yes, I hear the onion peeling. I can see that. Yeah. So, so then let's talk about, because you talk a bit about in your book, Living Hope: Steps to Leave Suffering Behind, post-traumatic stress disorder, and I think that from my vision, my purview, if you will, I think there's lots of people walking around with post-traumatic stress, and they did not go to war. They weren't victims of abuse or of any kind. Just, I think we live in such a high stress world now that there is that post-traumatic stuff that just triggers us because we live in repetitive stress situations.
I did a little research on it for the book launch, and found that 7.8% of the population has PTSD. And I was diagnosed with it, and of course you could see that because of the multiple events in my life. But they also say it affects women more often than men. It's more likely to occur if you have multiple events, if you were abused as a child, if you recently lost a loved one, if you're younger when it happens, if you have less education. It happens more often for people, African Americans or Hispanic. It can happen, though, like if you weren't necessarily abused, but you saw your parent hit by a raging
Right.
intimate person in the family. If you just lost a loved one traumatically, even witnessing a car accident or being in a car accident, or consider the New Yorkers who were in New York on 9/11, or teachers in the schools where the shootings have occurred since that. So there, and like you said, it isn't only the soldiers. Of course, it's the soldiers, but it's people like me and many an average person. So I wrote about that in the book because I want people to know to get help. My PTSD symptoms rarely come up anymore. One of them did recently. Someone turned on a gas fireplace. I was sitting next to it, and the sound of the gas igniting, that boom.
Yeah.
I felt it through my whole body, head to toe. It was like an electrical charge. And it took me, I decided to verbalize, since I was with friends, verbalize what that felt like and that I wanted it to pass, and it did. But I was really amazed how so many decades later that could still happen. So PTSD is a powerful thing, but I don't have the nightmares and a lot of the other traits any longer.
Oh, that's really good to know. And that's because of all the inner work. Now, how much do you think meditation has helped in reducing the post-traumatic stress stuff?
I think it's helped a lot. It's so immeasurable. But it gives me, daily meditation gives me, I love the word equanimity.
Equanimity, yeah.
In Buddhism, they use that word. It creates a peace inside of me that makes it that wherever I am, I've got that. And if I don't meditate, then wherever I am, when stress comes up, I'm as stressed as everybody else. So, and then I guess, there's insight meditation where you get insights and you see life from a little different angle. There's so much value in it, and it reduces cortisol levels and so on. So it, does 101 things.
Or more.
Yeah.
It should be on that. I know there's like tons of lists on the internet. 101 uses for. So let's talk a little bit, because in your book you were talking about powerlessness and feeling powerless. And I want to read a quote about that too, because I think there's people out there that feel that they cannot affect their lives or take responsibility. Okay. So you said, recognize the powerlessness, then use strength greater than yours, whether it is your higher power or those people who are healthy and recovering in a program. Eventually we grow. We come to a place where we empower ourselves. And I like that idea of empowering ourselves. I guess it goes back to the bucket with the hole and filling the hole, not because with an outside source, but from the inside out. Mm-hmm. So when somebody's dealing with feeling powerless, what would you say to them?
That everything you need is within you, that spark of life that we have, that is creative source within us, that's what you need. And the more that you can uncover it and access it and look to it and let it grow and build and recognize it as the essence of what you are, the powerlessness slips away and you become very empowered because you have greater truth of who you are and greater strength. One of my clients recently called it backbone, that she has backbone, and you betcha she does. That empowerment is really possible. And I did do recovery programs. There are ones like Adult Children of Alcoholics, Al-Anon, and like 15 others. But those are some of the ones that really help with family issues and moving you from that victim mentality to working in cahoots with something greater than yourself to create the life that you want.
I like
You're
that.
Empowered to do that.
I like working in cahoots.
Yeah.
So then let's talk about this self-love idea, because it seems like a way to I was going to say combat powerlessness, but a way to give it less power, that powerlessness, is to develop a sense of self-love. And so how do you go about doing that?
I think a mantra showed up in my head one day, and it was that I have always been loved. I am loved. Oh, that's it. I am loved. I always have been. I always will be.
I am loved. I always have been, and I always will be.
Yes, I am loved.
I can feel that.
And I took that and I ran with it. I wrote it in my journal. I wrote it in my day timer, and I used that over and over and over. And I said it to other people. Oh, you are loved. You always have been. You always will be. To change my thinking. I also did a lot of meditations. I created a meditation CD, most of which is available on my website, on my desertjewel.org website, about love. If we experience the love that we have for that creative source, for that which created earth and nature and beautiful animals and loved ones and so on, okay, the beautiful sky above this planet, if I take the love that I have for that, or any version of God, and I send it to God in my meditations, and I ask God to show me that I am loved, wow. It usually would overwhelm me. It would be more than I could handle. Like I needed to temper how much God could love me. But doing those meditations over and over, wrapping myself in pink light, visualizing a pink blanket of love around me, things like that were part of the process. And then I had to let people's love for me in.
Big time, right?
Yes. And that's why I write in the book about what my husband used to say to me. He used to ask me every day, well, who loves you? It changed my world.
What did you answer?
Oh, at first I could hardly answer. At first I'd be like, my cat. You do. But then with practice, and because he really made me grow in that area, I could list 10, or so, yeah, to where he didn't need to ask me that anymore.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what you're talking about in this, what I was hearing is you were talking about the meditating and sending love out to the higher power, to God, to the creative source, whatever anybody wants to call that, and then feeling it come back to you. That's another spiritual principle of the law of circulation, not to be confused with the law of karma, because what we give out, we receive multiplied when we give it open-heartedly.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It was very transformative for me, but it also reminds me of when we were talking about karma, that you can, as do the more enlightened masters, you can circumvent karma by creating positive conditions.
Oh, wow. How? What? Let me do that. I want to do that, Lynn. How?
Okay. So chanting does that. Meditating does it, as does goodwill. Goodwill. I do access bars. I teach access bars. And when we teach children access bars, a healing technique, we don't charge.
Okay, what is access bars?
Access bars is a relatively new modality of 32 points on the head that when you touch them, release old programming and imprints from thousands of years.
Oh, my goodness. I'm going to have to research this.
It's under access consciousness. So when we do that work with children, we do it for free. And or when I teach the classes, they get to take them for free. And I love that because I am gifting into the world a skill that they can carry it forward, and who knows what they might do with that. So that's really powerful. That feels so good. And also, sometimes when I work with children who have been abused, that I am gifting forward. I prefer not to charge or not to charge much for that kind of work, because I'm gifting forward from my past to their experience to their future. And isn't that a beautiful thing? So those are some of the things that circumvent karma and change your world powerfully. And you can look in the literature. There's a lot. There are others. Those are just the ones that come to mind right now.
I think those are great examples of how to create a better life. And I like your idea of because as you were saying, you gift it forward into the child's future. I like that because that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that there is this continuum that we all live on, and we continue to co-create from within ourselves whatever our future is, whether it's a generational future for our grandchildren or it's the individual future. Yeah.
I love that you say co-create, because that is how I see it, that God and I are not separate. We are one thing. I'm not all of what God is, but I am part of that. And together we co-create. I couldn't, I don't know. I couldn't even say that. I was going to say I couldn't create this life on my own. I can't be disconnected from that.
Yeah, I guess no matter how horrific things appear, there is always that divine connection.
And we don't even have to know about it. It just is. I think it's really empowering, the things that were talked about in this conversation, that there's so much hope. In the book, in the back of the book, I list action steps, little things to try, that particularly if a person has PTSD or is depressed, to do one action step like getting out into nature or picking up a different book or talking to someone who's supportive or letting go of someone who isn't supportive but was in your life anyway. Any of those little steps, you can then say, look, I am changing my life. I took a step forward today. I did this, and that's enough.
And that can be very empowering. That just the fact, like, say, I got out of bed today and I was okay. Yeah.
Huh.
Those are all very empowering things.
Yeah, for some people, it really is just down at that level. And it isn't that way for everybody, but for those that it is, it really matters.
So, Lynne, you have a website. It's Desert Jewel, JEWEL.org. And you mentioned earlier that you have a meditation CD. Can the listeners also get your book through there?
You can get it through that website, or there's a website just for the book. The book has its own website.
Yay.
It's LynneCockrum-Murphy.com. And the Cockrum-Murphy has a hyphen between it. LynneCockrum-Murphy.com. And you can order the book there. You can read a free chapter also. There's a Venn diagram of being versus doing activity that is on the website that is free.
Let's talk about that for just a second. We only have a couple minutes left. But
okay.
The being versus doing, because we've talked about that on Living Your Inspired Life. I want you to just tap on it again.
Okay, it's from a workshop that I created. The Venn diagram is just a graphic, and I include examples in the book of what is being, what is doing, and how you can look at your own life, see what the balance is and what you want more of. And then there's that middle area that is being and doing at the same time, like yoga or Tai Chi, or maybe gardening for some people. So you can get that stillness, that quiet inner state that's so good for us, even while you're doing. This is
just so for everybody that's listening, it's two circles that overlap, the being and the doing. And I can see, Lynne, that this is a great, like, check-in piece. You know, I can see myself Xeroxing this and having several copies. And when I'm feeling like I'm overwhelmed, I could sit down and use this diagram to check in and go, okay, how much am I being and how much am I doing? And where's the middle ground? Where's the equanimity?
And what little switch can I make that will bring more equanimity?
Right, more balance into life, into my life. And more peace, right?
Oh, my gosh. The way it's changed, I tell you, I'm so grateful for my life today. And I know at one time I really wished that I didn't have to be here.
Yeah.
So it's pretty great to be in this state.
Well, I'm grateful you're still here doing the work you do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah. Absolutely. So the book is called Living Hope, Steps to Leaving Suffering Behind. The author that I've been talking with and having such a joyful ride with is Lynne Cockrum-Murphy. And you can go to LynneCockrum-Murphy.com to get the book. I invite you guys to, if you are experiencing any kind of trauma and or drama or abuse in your life, this is a very lovely, inspirational book, a bedside thing. The chapters are short and you can download or soak up a lot of Lynne's wisdom from the book. So, Lynne, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. And let me also say that if it's easier to get it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, you can do that too. But thank you for having me, Susan. It was a wonderful conversation.
You're welcome. And I'm just going to end with, and so it is, namaste.